Happy Monday, everybody. Thanks for tuning into this 14th episode of the Southern Conservative Podcast. My name is Ty. Before we start, a quick programming note. Mother Nature has altered my plans to visit my family in the People's Republic of Maryland. So I will be returning there on Thursday, which means there will not be a podcast on Thursday, February 8th. There will be a podcast this Wednesday. So only 3 podcasts this week, this one today, the one tomorrow, and the one on Wednesday. Sorry for the confusion, but you can't predict the weather ahead of time, and sometimes you just have to make some last-minute changes. Before we get into the FISA memo that was made public on Friday afternoon, I want to congratulate the Philadelphia Eagles on their first Super Bowl win. They beat the New England Patriots last night 41-33. Now, I didn't get a chance to see the game as I had to execute my pharmacist duties last night, but I did get a chance to see the celebrations in Philadelphia after the game had concluded. Folks, I don't know if this is how Philadelphia normally celebrates major sports victories. Maybe somebody from Philadelphia can fill me in on this. But you want to talk about trashing the city. People were tearing down stoplight poles. A hotel canopy collapsed after people were standing on top of it. The front windows of a Macy's were broken. A gas station was looted. A college had graffiti on the doors and windows. Fireworks were being launched from the streets. Potted plants were upset, and people were throwing the plants back and forth. People were hanging off streetlight poles, smashing streetlights. A Toyota Prius was flipped. When people began clearing the streets, you saw newspaper stands upset and broken, dirt and trash and beer cans and bottles on the sidewalks. I mean, people really made a mess of things. There were people shouting expletives about Tom Brady. The Eagles fans were definitely happy last night, but they sure did get a bit rowdy. And that behavior, folks, is absolutely uncalled for. If you want to go celebrate in the streets, that's one thing. But to go out and destroy property, again, that's absolutely uncalled for. All right, folks, now let's get into the memo. I know you've all been waiting for this since Friday. The memo came out Friday afternoon after I had decided not to do a special bonus podcast that day covering the memo. It came out too late to do a podcast with my pharmacist duties that I had to perform. But now we can go over the memo and discuss what's in there and what it means. First, a lot of what we've been talking about in previous podcasts has been verified by this memo. Earlier sources had verified that the dossier written by Christopher Steele and paid for by Hillary's campaign and the DNC was used in part to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on Trump's campaign and his transition team. Well, according to the memo, the initial FISA warrant was obtained on October 21st, 2016. Warrants are only good for 90 days per FISA statute, which means that if you want to continue spying, you need to re-up the warrant. Well, it was re-upped 3 times. This means the spying went well into Trump's presidency months after he was inaugurated. So the FBI and the DOJ were conducting surveillance not only on Trump's campaign and his transition team, but also on his presidency. Now, the initial warrant was obtained to spy on Carter Page, a volunteer in Trump's campaign. But when you put all of the other details together, you'll see there was a coordinated effort to go after Donald Trump, to prevent him from winning the election in 2016, and then after he won, to take down his presidency. But going back to the FISA warrants, the applications for the warrants have to be signed by either the FBI director or the deputy director. Well, that would only be 2 people during this time period, James Comey and Andrew McCabe. Comey signed off on 3 warrants, and Andrew McCabe signed off on 1 warrant. The applications also have to be signed by either the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, or the Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division. So who from the Justice Department signed off on the applications? Well, Sally Yates, Dana Bente, and Rod Rosenstein, according to the memo. Now, Rosenstein didn't become the Deputy Attorney General until April 26, 2017. In other words, the spying went on at least during that time. But isn't it interesting that the guy appointed by Donald Trump would later sign off to reauthorize a FISA warrant to spy on members of Trump's circle. You want to talk about throwing the president under the bus, folks. Now, the memo makes mention that the dossier compiled by Christopher Steele formed an essential part of the FISA application, a dossier that was filled with lies and Russian propaganda. But key information was omitted when the FBI went before the FISA court. Information that was left out includes Christopher Steele compiled the dossier on behalf of the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. He was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign through Fusion GPS, which received its money from the law firm Perkins Coie. If you've been listening to these podcasts, you already know that information. Neither the original application nor any of the renewals make mention of the funding source from the DNC, despite senior officials at the DOJ and the FBI knowing the political origins of the dossier. You see, Steele himself was also a longtime source to the FBI and actually authorized Steele to be paid directly by the FBI in exchange for information he wrote in the dossier. To corroborate the dossier, in other words, to give it some legitimacy, which in reality there is no legitimacy to the dossier, it's all a bunch of lies and propaganda fed to Steele by the Russians. The FISA warrant application references a story from Yahoo News written on September 23, 2016 by Michael Isikoff discussing a trip Carter Page made to Moscow. Now, it's true that Carter Page made this trip to Moscow, and it's the only thing in this dossier that has been verified. So the FBI uses this story from Yahoo News to corroborate the information in the dossier, which was written by Christopher Steele. Now, if it's not ridiculous enough that Yahoo News is being used as a confirmation point in a FISA application, Yahoo News, that story, was written using information provided by Christopher Steele, the same person who wrote the dossier. In other words, there is no corroboration. You can't say that the Yahoo News story corroborates your findings in the dossier if the same guy who wrote the dossier also supplied information to Yahoo News. That key detail was not part of the FISA application. It was left out. Steele was later terminated as a source for the FBI after Steele revealed his relationship to the FBI in an article published by Mother Jones on October 30th, 2016. The memo mentions that Steele's relationship with the media violated the cardinal rule of maintaining confidentiality, making Steele a less than reliable source for the FBI. Before Steele was fired, he maintained a relationship with a guy at the Justice Department, you've heard his name before, Bruce Ohr. Bruce Ohr at the time was the Associate Deputy Attorney General. He had close ties to Sally Yates, the acting Deputy Attorney General at the time of Trump's inauguration, as well as Rod Rosenstein, who Trump ultimately appointed to be Deputy Attorney General. Steele had told Bruce Ohr that he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected, and he was passionate about him not being president. In other words, Steele had it out for Trump. And so he wrote that salacious dossier that was paid for by the candidate who would have become president had Trump not won, which is what Steele wanted. Ohr had recorded this in FBI files, but it was never told to the FISA court. During this time, Bruce Ohr's wife, Nellie Ohr, was working for Fusion GPS, the outfit that hired Christopher Steele. His wife was doing opposition research against Trump, and she provided that information to her husband, who then turned it over to the FBI. So you see, once Steele was no longer in direct contact with the FBI, Nellie Ohr, who worked for the outfit that hired Steele, had her information given to the FBI via her husband. In other words, it was a workaround to continue supplying information to the FBI via a senior official at the DOJ. The relationships Bruce Ohr had with Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele were not made known to the FISA court. The head of the FBI's counterintelligence division stated the corroboration of the dossier was only in its infancy at the time the original application to the FISA court was made. After Christopher Steele had been terminated by the FBI assessed the dossier as being only minimally corroborated. Now, according to testimony by James Comey in June 2017, the dossier was, quote, salacious and unverified. Yet, in January 2017, he briefed Trump on the dossier while he was still the president-elect. So if you're going to brief the president on a dossier, you would think the FBI director would think that there would be some legitimacy to it. But Comey knew all along that the dossier was a total bunch of BS. Now, here is probably the most damning information in the memo, in my opinion. Andrew McCabe, who was just removed as deputy director to the FBI by Director Christopher Wray, testified in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought without the dossier. Folks, the FBI would not have even bothered obtaining a warrant had it not been for the dossier. So the dossier was absolutely key to getting the warrant, or at least attempting to get the warrant, and yet the DOJ and the FBI knew all along the political underpinnings of the dossier, and that the dossier, according to Comey, was salacious and unverified. But they went to the FISA court anyway. Folks, that is solid proof that this was a coordinated job to take down Donald Trump. It involved senior officials at the FBI, the DOJ, Hillary's campaign, the DNC, Perkins Coie, Fusion GPS, and Christopher Steele. Absolutely unbelievable. It's the last paragraph of this memo that connects the FBI's original investigation into Trump-Russia collusion to the dossier and the special counsel investigation. The FISA application references George Papadopoulos, who recently pled guilty to lying to the FBI. He didn't get charged with colluding with Russia, just lying to the FBI. Anyway, the original FISA application was made against Carter Page, but there has been no evidence of any collusion or conspiracy between Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. Remember, he is the man who was drunk when he told an Australian ambassador that Russia had gotten Clinton emails. But he got that information from a professor in London, and the ambassador gave that information to the Australian government, who gave it to the FBI. Basically, the information supplied to the FBI by Papadopoulos is fourth-hand hearsay. The information caused Peter Strzok to open the original FBI investigation into Donald Trump in July 2016. And the memo makes mention of text messages between Strzok and his mistress Lisa Page, including the text message about working with Andy because there was a chance Trump would be elected. Remember, that's the insurance policy text message. Now, the memo doesn't state what the insurance policy was, but it's too obvious. It was the dossier. It was to be able to spy on a close Trump associate to get into Trump's inner circle and maybe even the president himself. And to think that the warrant was re-upped 3 times. Of course, as the FBI's investigation went on, and after Comey leaks a memo to a Columbia Law School professor, who in turn leaked it to the New York Times, there were calls for a special counsel investigation to take over. And that is what happened. And now we know that exculpatory information was withheld from the FISA court, information that would have shown the coordination to take down Trump and information about political underpinnings of the dossier. Had that information been made known to the court, it probably would have never issued the warrant. So the atmosphere would not have even been created that led to the calling of a special counsel investigation. And by the way, the special counsel investigation has not found any evidence of collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia, and the only thing Mueller has been able to pin on anyone are process crimes. Paul Manafort has some other charges that have been brought against him that are more legitimate. But if you believe that the special counsel would never have been formed in the first place had the FBI and DOJ not coordinated to take down Trump and had all the underlying information been brought to the FISA court, then Paul Manafort would never have been charged with anything. This memo is very damning to top officials at the FBI and DOJ, and in my opinion, the special counsel investigation needs to be shut down. Now, Devin Nunes, who chairs the House Intelligence Committee, says the memo is just Phase 1 of its investigation. Phase 2 apparently involves looking at the State Department and what role they may have played in all of this. You'll remember that Byron York over at the Washington Examiner published a story about 2 weeks ago that Christopher Steele had connections inside the State Department. Speaking of Byron York, he has a bombshell story in the Washington Examiner today I came across this morning as I was preparing for this podcast. We'll get into that in just a bit. You'll remember in a story published by Sarah Carter that Sidney Blumenthal was briefed on the dossier. You might remember that Blumenthal was being paid by Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State in exchange for foreign policy advice. Now, this is just speculation on my part, but was Blumenthal relaying dossier information back to Hillary Clinton, who was the source of the funding for the dossier? It's something to think about, and it kind of goes along with this new article by Byron York. And you have the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz, who is going to release a report in March concerning the handling of the Hillary Clinton investigation. The report is expected to extensively cover how James Comey handled that investigation. But it was Horowitz's office that uncovered the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. So the report might shed some more light on that. Also, there is indication that the Democratic version of the Nunes memo will be released. Paul Ryan has indicated he is in favor of the Democratic memo being released, citing a need for increased transparency. There is a vote expected today in the House Intelligence Committee, so we'll see what happens. Of course, the president would have to sign off on that as well. Now, while the House Intelligence Committee was working on their memo concerning the dossier and FISA abuses, the Senate has been busy at work as well. Byron York over at the Washington Examiner has a bombshell report out today. Headline: Dossier author Steele wrote another anti-Trump memo. Was fed info by Clinton-connected contact and Obama State Department. Here's the article. A newly released document from the Senate Judiciary Committee says Christopher Steele, the former British spy who compiled the Trump dossier, wrote an additional memo on the subject of Donald Trump and Russia that was not among those published by BuzzFeed in January 2017. The newly released document is an unclassified and heavily redacted version of the criminal referral targeting Steele filed on January 4th by Republican Senators Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. It appears to confirm some level of coordination between the extended Clinton circle and the Obama administration in the effort to seek damaging information about then-candidate Donald Trump. According to the referral, Steele wrote the additional memo based on anti-Trump information that originated with a foreign source. In a convoluted scheme outlined in the referral, the foreign source gave the information to an unnamed associate of Hillary and Bill Clinton, who then gave the information to an unnamed official in the Obama State Department, who then gave the information to Christopher Steele. Steele wrote a report based on the information, but the redacted version of the referral does not say what Steele did with the report after that. Published accounts in The Guardian and The Washington Post have indicated that Clinton associate Cody Shearer was in contact with Steele about anti-Trump research, and Obama State Department official Jonathan Weiner was a connection between Steele and the State Department during the 2016 campaign. When Grassley and Graham filed the referral with the Justice Department on January 4th, the document was classified, although the two senators released an unclassified cover letter announcing the referral. What followed was a month of haggling with the Justice Department over what material in the referral could be made public. The result is the version of the referral released this morning. It has whole paragraphs and keywords blacked out, making it hard to discern its full meaning. For example, a press release accompanying the referral said the referral contains verbatim quotes from the Carter Page surveillance application that are not included in the House Intelligence Committee memo. Specifically, the referral quotes the application's descriptions of Steele's statements to the FBI about his contacts with the media. Lest anyone get too excited, the press release went on to say that the quotes remain redacted in the version of the referral released Monday. Also redacted is information related to the key allegation of the Grassley Graham referral, that Steele was untruthful with the FBI and Justice Department over the issue of his many contacts with the press. If Steele was acting as a trusted source for the FBI on the highly confidential Trump-Russia investigation, it would have been improper for him to share his information with the press at the same time. Some of the redacted passages also relate to the question of statements about Steele's press contacts that the FBI made to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in applying for the Page surveillance warrant that was the subject of the House Intelligence Committee Memo released on Friday. It's a lot to digest, but further details will have to wait until the rest of the referral is declassified. Senate sources say they hope that will happen soon. Now, I'll post a link in the description of this video where you can read Byron York's article and see the document released by the Senate Judiciary Committee. And folks, it is absolutely heavily redacted. I mean, there's almost entire pages that are blacked out. I'm also going to post a link where you can read the entire House Intelligence Committee memo that was released on Friday. Now, before we wrap up today, folks, I want to remind everybody to please check out the Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/Southern Conservative. That's facebook.com/Southern Conservative. There you will find links to articles from conservative outlets on stories you might not hear about in the mainstream media. Plus, you will find links in the news feed to the daily podcasts. Be sure to also subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll be notified when a new podcast has been uploaded. New podcasts are created daily, Monday through Thursday. And a reminder, again, there will not be a podcast this Thursday. There will only be 2 more podcasts this week, the one tomorrow and one on Wednesday. Well, that's it for today's podcast. Be sure to come back tomorrow for another podcast. Have a great day, everybody.